there and welcome to the Big Apple Scroll podcast. My name is Sam.
My name is Steve.
And today we're asking what's the crack about the British Isles?
Well, I hope we'll soon find out. If we don't, we'll be in big trouble.
Indeed, we'll do our best. We're going to define it for you listening, talk about our experience and connection with it, because both of us are somehow inexplicably connected with the British Isles. We'll talk about the culture there and the differences that there might be in these little places, the difference in food and anything else that might come up, slang, for example, and any problems we may have had in the British Isles. So, are you all sitting comfortably, listeners? Stephen?
I am.
And tell us about you, because this will be your first experience in a podcast.
Yes, it's the first time in this podcast. I'm very excited to be taking part, and I hope we can have a good chat about our native Britain.
Right. And you're a teacher at Big Apple School, are you?
Yes, I've taught here for many years now. I don't care to remember how long, maybe 4 or 5.
Okay. Right. Since you were about 20.
Well, I think you could add another 30 years. Another 35 years on to that.
Okay. And Stephen, please, can you define the British Isles for us all?
Well, I think it's quite easy to say that the British Isles is made up of all the islands and the mainland of Great Britain and Ireland.
Okay.
The difference between the British Isles and the United Kingdom is that the British Isles includes the Republic of Ireland.
Right.
And it also includes strange islands around Great Britain.
Does it include the Isle of Man, the British Isles? Or is it separate?
It includes the Isle of Man is included in the British Isles, yes.
And if you don't know, that's a little island kind of stuck in the middle between mainland Britain, England, Scotland, Wales, and the rest, the island of Ireland, including Northern Ireland and Republic.
That's right. Yeah. And if you have a lot of money, you can invest it there because it's tax-free.
Right. Oh, yeah. I've been there. I'm not sure I want to live there though. Okay. And what can I add? Well, just to clarify, make sure people understand, the Republic of Ireland is not the UK. It's governed independently in Dublin. But it is classed as the British Isles. So it's not a governmental thing. It's simply classed as the British Isles, even though they're not British there.
That's right. British Isles is a geographical situation. It's not political at all.
No.
It was a term invented by the Romans.
Right.
There was...
you know a lot more about this than I do.
Britannia Magna.
Britannia Magna.
Which was Great Britain, in English, and Britannia Parva, which was Little Britain, which was Ireland.
Goodness, really? Wow.
And so that's the British Isles.
You learn something new every day. Stephen, where were you born?
Well, if I say I was born in Mansfield in Nottinghamshire, nobody will know where that is.
I don't even know where that is. I know it's England. Yeah.
So I usually say, when people ask me where was I born, I usually say I was born near Manchester.
Yeah.
Because everybody knows where Manchester is.
Been there and I know where that is. On a map.
Yes.
Or roughly at least. Quite close to Liverpool, if you don't know, which is quite close to the coast in the northeast of England. Am I?
That's
you can
right.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
It's the industrial heartland of the north of England, where all the real work is done.
Right. Are there coal mines in that, or is it?
There used to be coal mines,
yeah.
But before Margaret Thatcher closed them down.
Right. There was a bit of a hullabaloo about that.
Yes, before your time, I think.
Probably before my time, or maybe when I was a little toddler.
1984, I think.
84, I would have been 1 year old.
I was a young schoolmaster in Derbyshire at that time. And that's when Margaret Thatcher closed the coal mines, and there were huge protests throughout, and the general strikes.
Yes, right. I've heard about this in my history lessons, but I was too young to care.
I was there.
I was looking for my nappy at that time. I'm sorry. Sorry, that makes you feel bad.
No.
Did you grow up in that area then? Mansfield, yeah?
Mansfield is in Nottinghamshire, which is was on the East Midlands coalfield.
Right.
I was taken at age 6 days old across the border to Derbyshire, where I grew up in a little town called Alfreton.
Right.
And I stayed there until I left university in 1981.
Okay. was it a bit bigger than Mansfield? Or
No, about the same size,
About the same
25,000. 25,000.
small town then?
Small town. Mansfield is very famous, or used to be very famous, for beer.
Right.
It's the Tomsk of Great Britain, I think.
Okay, right. And I'm also from the UK, from the British Isles, but not from Great Britain. I'm from Northern Ireland. And actually, I'm just thinking it's quite similar. My town is Portadown, which the closest sort of more well-known place is Belfast, which is the regional capital. And it's about 50 kilometers northeast of Portadown, and it's about the same size, 22,000, as where you grew up. So.
That's right. I know Portadown quite well. It has a motto, if I'm not mistaken, thus far and no further.
Right.
Did you know that?
I didn't know that, but I can understand it.
We better explain that in former times, when there was a lot of trouble between the nationalists and the loyalists, right. Portadown was...
Two different mentalities of kind of Irish people, yeah.
Was a border.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and it's... Yeah, there's a lot of history in Northern Ireland, and recent history, a lot of things we could talk about, but maybe we'll save it for another time.
Yes.
Well, let's see how we get on. Did you travel in the British Isles as a boy?
Yes. My grandmother, my mother's mother, was quite a traveller. She'd grown up in India, and that she was taken by her father and mother at a young age to Dublin.
Right.
Where her father, my great-grandfather, was on the, I think, Great Western Railway, which was a big railway that was being built.
Wow.
And they lived in a place called Kingstown. And during the Troubles in, I think, 1922, or a bit earlier, I think.
Right. When there was just after the Easter Rising with... Yeah, okay.
Yes, you'll have to look that up on the...
Right, Easter Rising people, yeah.
They moved up to Bangor in Northern Ireland, not far from where you hail from.
Nice town, Bangor.
Yeah. And then they moved over to Derbyshire.
Right.
And talking about my travelling, my grandmother took me to Ireland several times when I was a little boy.
Right.
The only other place I travelled... Because in those days, in the 1960s and 70s, it wasn't usual to travel around so much. People didn't go abroad.
Even in the 80s, even when my parents were younger, it was unusual, even for them to travel, actually, yeah.
People stayed at home for the holidays. But as I say, my grandmother took me to these places, and the only other place I visited at school was France. First with my grandmother, and then with school. And I never traveled. I never had a passport until I was, I think, nearly 30 years old.
Right. Wow. Okay. It's different today, isn't it?
Yes.
It's even in my lifetime, it's changed actually, because 90s it wasn't normal to go outside the UK. And what I will say is, like, we often traveled from Northern Ireland by boat, by ferry.
Yeah.
We went to England or Scotland, or even occasionally to Wales. And it was quite normal for our family in the 90s to go camping, for example, in England or in other places in Great Britain. And we quite well traveled. I never really visited Ireland because of so much political problems during the 70s. During the 90s when I was a boy. Even then, there were a lot of terrorist attacks and problems. And so it wasn't generally seen as a good idea to go down south.
No, people were very wary in those days of travelling out of their district even. And Belfast, which is the capital of Northern Ireland, was a very dangerous place in the 70s and 80s.
Belfast was quite notorious because of the bombings and terrorist attacks against policemen, and with different groups involved. And also Portadown was a centre of activity as well.
That's right. And most people that were killed was in the city of Armagh. That had the greatest casualties, even more than Londonderry, which was very...
Yeah, and that's not far, actually, from Portadown.
But I think we should say to our dear listeners that Northern Ireland is not that type of place now. If you're visiting, maybe you'll tell us a little bit about the benefits of visiting.
I guess we really need to deal with the elephant in the room. So talk about that. During, I don't know, when did it happen? Late 1960s?
I think it was 1969, 68.
Right. There really kicked off a problem between two mentalities in Northern Ireland, between mostly Irish Catholic people who believe in a united Ireland, so Northern Ireland becoming part of the political system of the rest of Ireland, and the mainly kind of Protestant, British identifying people who are classed as unionists, believing in the United Kingdom. And they want Northern Ireland to stay in the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
And there was, it seems, I don't think I'm wrong in saying, though I wasn't alive, that there was a lot of prejudice against Catholic people.
There was. Well, first of all, I think people have to realise that Ireland is basically two races. Mm-hmm. There's the Celts of the south, and Northern Ireland was mainly inhabited by Scots.
Yeah, Scots and some English people.
It was settled by the Scots, Picts they were called, from Scotland.
Way back in the early 1600s.
Oh, no, much before that.
Even before that?
We're talking about before the Norman Conquest of 800s, 900s.
Right, goodness, yeah.
And then they were driven out.
Don't remember that. How do you remember that?
I read it. And then they were driven out by the incoming Celts from the south, from Europe, and they went into Scotland.
Right.
And then you're talking about the settlement or the plantation of Ulster.
Yes, back in early 1600s.
When the Scots came back and many English people came in, and that caused problems because...
And even today it's a source of contention.
The Catholics couldn't get work so much.
So speaking about sort of 60s and 70s, there was a lot of strong feeling among Irish Catholics that they weren't being treated well. And due to, Bloody Sunday, I think, was the main thing that kicked it off. There were a lot of people killed during a protest by policemen. We still don't really know who's to blame today, for sure. I mean, it's not been determined for sure.
That's right. Well, the thing was that. I think it was 1968 or 69, the civil authorities had problems maintaining law and order. Mm-hmm. And the Prime Minister of Northern Ireland, I can't remember his name at the moment, O'Neill, I think it was.
O'Neill,
invited the British Army to come in.
Right.
And this caused a lot of problems because the British Army sort of didn't know how to deal with the situation very well. And this led to this Bloody Sunday, where it was said that the army opened fire on innocent civilians. Whether they did or not, nobody knows. It's
still a contentious issue today. And leading on from that, there were about 30 years of terrorism and conflict in Northern Ireland from groups from both sides of the debate, if you like, were shooting at each other and at the police force, army, and even blowing up civilians at times. So it was really it occasionally spilled over into England as well.
We had a lot of terror attacks in England in the 70s, in Guildford, for example. Mm-hmm. There was Guildford pub bombing.
Right.
And the wrong people were arrested and served about 20 years in jail.
Right,
for
goodness.
Which caused a big scandal.
Right. But on a positive note, I want to promote Northern Ireland. In 1998, there was finally a peace agreement signed, and shaky start, and still shaky at times, but it's a safe country to stay in, to visit now, and has been for 20 years or so.
If I'm not mistaken, the statistics are that it's the safest region of the United Kingdom.
Yeah, I would believe that.
Belfast.
It's quite rural too, actually, although I know the rest of the UK can be like that as well.
But it is a beautiful place, so if you have the opportunity,
thank you.
people should go to it.
That's why I wanted to talk to you today. I want you to promote Northern Ireland.
Beautiful countryside, and lakes, lochs rather.
Yeah, lochs we call them, but lakes they
Yes.
are. And in fact, it's called the Emerald Isle. I mean, it's part of Ireland geographically, at least. And it is the Emerald Isle, and
Yes,
it is
it is.
very much green and beautiful and full of wildlife.
And full of jokes as well, I think.
Good humor, yeah. It's what we call the Craic.
Yes.
So let's think about the cultural differences. Can you tell me, so having traveled a bit, can you tell me much about the cultural differences between the different parts of the UK?
I would say that the main cultural difference is not between England and between the different countries, but between the north of England,
Right.
which I would also include part of Scotland, because it's historically was Edwin's borough, which is Edinburgh, and King Edwin
Wow.
was
getting a real history lesson
king
today.
of the whole of the north of England.
Yeah,
So the culture of the north of England is entirely different from the culture of the south.
right.
What it means for us today is that the people in the north of England still use a lot of the old language of England.
Right.
Which, or not only England, but Scandinavia and the northern
slang
countries.
words.
Well, they would say it's not slang words.
Yeah.
It's dialect. It's the different words for different things, like to loop, for example.
Right.
It means to jump.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
Loop or stile.
Okay. No idea.
It
Gangnam
means to
Style.
jump over a stile. A stile
Wow.
is a place where you cross a fence. You step on a board and stand over the fence.
Right. I know what a style is, yeah.
Yeah.
I usually try to cross them in style.
In style, yes.
But I've never looped over a style, but I'll try that the next time.
Yes.
Wow.
And they still use a lot of thee and thou in the north of England.
Yeah. Wow.
Like if you're studying your English grammar, you know that the old form of you are was thou art.
Yeah, right.
And in the north of England, they won't say how are you. They'll say how art thou.
Really?
How art thou?
Goodness.
They're all right.
And that's the kind of normal thing. It's not,
Yes, if
it's not an
people
abstract.
speak, no, it's not an abstract,
Wow.
especially in the countryside and in the
And that's singular form, isn't it, of you?
you. Yes,
Thou.
thou. How art thou? They
goodness.
contract it to how art thou?
Right.
Art thou right? Are you all right?
Art thou well? Hi.
Art thou
well?
Yes.
Wow. And they have Ambrosia custard?
No,
Is
I
that-
think that's in
further south?
That's in Devon and Cornwall, I believe.
Oh, that's well down
That's
in the
another
south.
part of old England. That's
Right.
that wasn't part of England.
Right, yeah.
Devon and Cornwall. That was part of Wales.
Right. Oh,
In
the Welsh lost out.
In the Welsh, yes.
It's a nice place for, if you ever go to Devon, you get a nice scone.
Scone.
It's kind of like a sweet bread, or not too sweet, with some strawberry jam and clotted cream.
That's right.
Which I don't know what the equivalent would be in maybe it's kind of like skushanka in Russia, but it's not quite the
It's
same.
caramelized cream. It's cream, very thick cream that's put into a very low oven at a very, very slow heat for all night,
Yeah.
and it congeals.
Have you made this?
No, but my grandmother used to make
Wow. Okay. And it's delicious.
it. Oh yes.
And a cup of tea or coffee with that. It goes down
yes,
very
you have
well.
tea, yes.
Very well.
And jam and scones, because in the north of England, I think they call them scones,
I call them scones.
and in the south of England, they call them scones.
I think scones very posh. To
Yeah,
talk
I
like
think
that.
so, yes.
It sounds it to me. Maybe I just because I'm not used to it. My family always scone.
Well, it's better.
That's how we say it.
It's better than what do they call it in Northern Ireland? Somebody once sent me for what's that special bread that they
Soda farl.
a farl, yes.
Right, a farl.
Don't fetch me a farl.
Good soda farl is great. Or barn brack.
Yes.
Or potato bread. Or we sometimes call tatty bread. Oh man, it's fantastic. Have you noticed, I mean, you've been in the Republic of Ireland, have you?
Yes.
Have you noticed the difference between it and Northern Ireland?
Yes.
Culturally? How would you describe it?
I think people of the south of Ireland are much more, their language is much more musical and softer.
Right.
And also they have, I think, a much more relaxed view on life.
I would agree with that for sure. I don't know. I mean, I think Northern Irish, the Northern Irish accent is, it's an accent of its own, and not just one, it's several. But definitely, I would agree that the Irish from the Republic, I think they're much more chilled out.
Oh yes,
about things.
Yes.
I think we in Northern Ireland tend to be a little bit more like kind of business style from England. We're more organized, want to be more organized and more strict than in Ireland. I think they're a bit chilled out and relaxed.
Yes, in the north they're much more intense, and
I think so.
The talking is much more urgent. And,
right. Yeah,
you can do this accent much better than me.
I'm from Northern Ireland, so I am. That's Northern Irish accent, and not that's only one of them, but
yes. The best one I think is from what's the Scottish town? Ballymena, is it?
Ballymena, right. So this is Ulster Scots.
Yes.
In the sort of north central Northern Ireland. And it's a different accent. Even strange to me, the accent there actually.
What do you people sorry.
It's a bit like, I'm from Ballymena, hey. It's very almost Scottish, honestly.
Well, you can see Scotland from Ballymena.
Right.
It's just across the way.
Yeah, and they've deep roots from Scotland.
Yes.
So, yeah.
But the culture, coming back to the different cultures of the United Kingdom, I think you'd find one of the greatest cultural places is Edinburgh.
Yeah.
Because that is a really beautiful city, culture, and it's supposed to have the best English accent.
In Edinburgh?
Yes, the Edinburgh accent is supposed to have the best.
Capital of Scotland?
Yes, well, because it didn't used to be the capital of Scotland. Edinburgh was the capital of Northern England.
Right, okay.
And it was the Scotland was really made up of the Lowlanders.
Right.
Which were from Northumberland. And the Hielanders,
right,
which are tribes.
Yeah.
The Campbells, the McDonalds, the McDougals, Macduffs.
Right.
And all these tribes were constantly fighting one another.
As they do, yeah.
And the only people they allied with against another tribe was the English.
Right.
Oh, it's very dirty work. Often.
That was a bad doing,
yes,
as we would say. And what about differences in food? Culinary differences? What did you find when you travelled to Northern Ireland? I mean, we talked about tatty bread.
Soda bread is very popular.
Soda bread, yeah.
And there's a difference between Irish porridge and Scots porridge and English porridge. Irish porridge tends to be very thick and lumpy, I think.
Okay.
Scotch porridge is full of salt. And English porridge is like a tsianka. It's soft and white and.
You much prefer it?
Yes, I do. Yes, I don't like Irish porridge.
Okay, fair enough.
Or Scots porridge.
And the differences in people will probably know the fried breakfast we have.
Yes.
You have your English breakfast. You have we have an Ulster fry, we call it, and then you have your Irish breakfast. And do they have it in Scotland as well?
I believe so. Yes.
I'm sure they have it, but whether they call it Scottish,
I think in the Highlands or the Heelands, as they call them, they may eat fish for breakfast.
Right.
It's more traditional, but
raw. Yes.
Smoked, okay. I think.
Right.
But one thing that the Ulster fry contains, which we used to have in Britain, but they don't like it so much now, is black and white pudding.
Black and white pudding.
Or blood pudding, as it's
made of blood, yeah. Is it basically blood and some suet? It's like a grain.
Suet and oats.
Suet and oats, and it's just fried, is it? Or is it boiled?
I think it's boiled first, and then it's fried.
And I for a long time, in fact, for all of my childhood, I never ate it. I never at all tried it. And then I did try it not long ago. And although it is the main ingredient, or one of them, is blood, it is quite delicious.
Yeah,
actually.
It is.
And it's not what I was expecting.
It's rather like fried kielbasa.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, maybe a little bit softer, maybe.
Yes.
But
Yes.
Not.
Yes, softer. I would
Not
say.
hugely
yes.
different. What about slang? We talked a little bit about some slang, like using thee and thou. Although
No, that's not slang. That's
slang, but
if you go to the north of
dialect.
England, they would say that that's correct grammar.
well,
That's how Shakespeare wrote.
You could argue they're right, actually.
Slang, I think, are words which have come into the language from different places which really don't mean anything. They're just invented words.
Right. Like the crack. What's the crack? Is it,
I don't know. Maybe that's an old Irish word. I don't know.
I think it's got roots in English, actually.
Yes.
And we have foundered. Do you know the word foundered? I'm foundered.
No, I don't know that one.
Here in Siberia in the winter, I would be foundered. Without
foundered.
A coat.
Oh, you foundered. Yes.
Foundered is to be very cold.
Yes. And then there's going out in your disabels. Have you heard about that?
I haven't. Can you
That's an
explain
old
that?
Ulster saying, I believe, going out in your disabels.
Really?
That comes from the French dishabiller, to be without clothing.
Right.
And it means to go out in your old clothes.
I must admit, I haven't tried that. Or maybe I've tried old clothes, but wow.
Yes, it's like your gardening clothes.
Actually, now and again, even in Northern Ireland, some of the kind of slang and dialect can shock me.
Yes.
There's one part of Northern Ireland where they say "wan" instead of "one." You're County Tyrone kind of direction. They say "wan" instead of "one." And the first time I heard it, I almost burst out laughing. I was so shocked, and it was the rest of the number. They were quoting a phone number, 1471. And I was like, what? Every other number sounded normal, but "wan" was so strange to me.
And I believe in Ireland they still use the old pronunciation of chaos. Chassos.
No, not in my experience.
In the south, they do. Yes.
Not where I'm from. Not my family, at least.
Oh, you're probably more cultured than.
Oh, of course. Don't you know that?
Well, I suspected it, but I didn't.
I've never heard it. Honestly, I've never heard that. Chaos is chaos to me. I've never heard another. What's the
Chassos?
Chassos.
The whole thing is chassos.
Never heard of that. But now I'm going to start using it. Chassos. Have you ever had a problem with an accent in the British Isles?
I have a problem, and it's not the problem with the people. It's a problem with the Irish Catholics of Armagh.
Right.
I lived in Armagh for a couple of months some years ago.
Okay.
And I still meet some people from there. And there's one chap, I just can't understand a word he's saying.
Right.
I have to ask him to repeat and to speak the Queen's English.
Oh, if you say Queen's English, he might not be in your favour.
Yes.
I once went to Cork, and I went into what we call a ship shop to buy chips and fish and chips or something of that kind. And the man serving me asked me, did I want salt and vinegar? Which is what we often put on chips. And there just so happened to be a local, or not a local, but someone living locally with me. And quite honestly, she had to translate. I had no clue, and if he had repeated it 20 times, I still wouldn't have known what he said.
This was in Cork, or
this was in Cork. Cork is the very south of the Republic of Ireland, and I had not one clue. I could understand everything else, but when he asked for salt and vinegar, do I want salt and vinegar? I had no notion, honestly. There was no syllable that sounded like it to me. So, and occasionally there are some accents, very strong, people that speak with a very thick accent.
Yes.
In England too, but in Dublin I've noticed it can be difficult to make them out sometimes.
In Dublin, I think there is a specific accent which is difficult to understand, but I think most people, especially educated people, they can speak...
they can speak well if they choose to.
But they do know a lot of the old ways. They can put it on.
It's I think it's a kind of a identity for people. And in fact, when I was in my early 20s, I used to speak with a very strong accent, very strong local Northern Irish accent. And for me, it was part of my identity. When I started to work in an office in Belfast with lots of people from all over the country, the region, I kind of dropped it and started to speak more clearly, and which wasn't probably not a bad thing. I think if I heard myself talk now with that strong accent, I'd cringe.
Yeah.
But at the time, I felt this is my identity, and I don't want to hide it.
See, before the 60s and 70s, in schools, they did teach people to speak the Queen's English, as we
Right.
if when I was at school, if you went speaking as if down here, what were you doing tonight, me old? The master would say, you don't speak like that here. You speak
Right.
the Queen's English.
Right. And so now you speak like, but Queen's English is, I mean, what is it?
Well, this is another point, because I think
we could argue against that.
The Queen's English, I think, was a combination of English that was made up by the BBC.
Right.
It started when newspapers were first introduced, because they had to sort of find words which everybody understood.
Yeah.
And so a lot of old local words were dropped.
Right. Okay. So it's basically a UK standard English.
It's a standard English, so everybody can understand it.
Right. And I remember I've heard some of the old BBC broadcasts from TV, and they're so posh. They speak they speak so not only clearly, but their pronunciation, it's impeccable. But it's very, to me, it sounds like they're so rich and so well-to-do. And not, it's a disconnect with ordinary people. I don't know if I can demonstrate with it. Today, in London, it's very, 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 very sophisticated almost accent.
Well, there was a very famous broadcaster called Wilfred Pickles. He was a broadcaster before the war.
Great name.
And he was a Yorkshireman.
Yeah.
And he spoke with a very broad Yorkshire accent. He was an actor as well.
Yeah, right.
And he did in the war, when the BBC were threatened by takeover by the Nazis.
Right.
They started to introduce newsreaders. First of all, they had to speak their name, tell who it was, before they were anonymous. And they brought Wilfred Pickles in with this slight Yorkshire accent because they thought that the Germans could imitate very precisely a received pronunciation.
Okay.
But they could not imitate correctly a Yorkshire accent.
Right.
It wasn't that he spoke broad Yorkshire. He would just say, it wouldn't be like that. It would be, he would say, now, here is the news, and this is Wilfred Pickles reading it. And at the end of the midnight news, he would say, so this is the end of the broadcast for today. Good night, everyone. And for those people in Yorkshire, good night. Good night.
Right. And so they knew that he wasn't a German, basically.
Yes.
Wow, okay.
But after the war, he did a program where he went interviewing people around the country. And he was taken he was interviewing an old man, a farmer. And the farmer said, Wilfred Pickles said, the farmer said, did you get good replies from people when you went on with your Yorkshire accent on the BBC? Was it popular?
Yeah.
He said, well, it's very funny. He said it was popular with everybody except from Yorkshire.
Right.
And he said, I couldn't think why it was not popular in Yorkshire.
Yeah.
And then this old farmer said, well, I can tell you exactly, Wilfred. He said, we sat there listening to you on wireless.
On wireless.
Reading news.
Aye.
And I said to my Mabel, we send our Johnny to grammar school.
Aye.
Grammar school, to learn to talk proper. And all we hear on wireless is Wilfred Pickles speaking like we do.
I love it. Great accent. On wireless. Great. Well, I think nowadays the broadcasters speak with their own accent, but of course they still use a standard English.
Yes, it's true.
So to conclude, what is your favorite place? And you're not going to offend me if you don't say Northern Ireland, but what is your favorite place in the British Isles?
Well, I've recently started to discover Scotland, the Highlands of Scotland, and the islands of Scotland on the west coast.
Yeah.
I'd never been before until about two years ago. And now I'm really very interested in.
I'd like to go there.
It's a really beautiful place.
Yeah. I haven't been there yet. I've been up in the northeast, but never in the Highlands on the west, so I would love to go there. But as far as I've been all over Ireland and lots of places in the mainland UK, but I guess there are two places. I like Dublin to visit at least. I like the shops there and the culture and the atmosphere, and it's more relaxed than Northern Ireland. And I also love the mountains in Northern Ireland, and I've talked about them before,
yes,
but they're the Mourne Mountains, and they're nice and small, simple, beautiful, not a lot of things that want to eat or bite you. It's
no mosquitoes.
No mosquitoes. It's a great place. So that was the crack about the British Isles. We talked quite a bit about the political situation in Northern Ireland. We shared about the cultural differences between the Republic and Northern Ireland and even parts of England, north and south. We talked about the food a little bit as well, about the language, some differences there, and about using or not using an accent. So that was the crack about the British Isles.